Hello, everyone. Hello, my friend Will. Welcome to another Lunch Tech in Chat. There's lots going on in the world. I'm working from home today, so you can see my nice office
Outfit?
background. Yeah,
Yeah, an
no,
outfit.
my outfit and my background. How are you, Will?
Yeah, good. Same here. Today is working from the home office, so in just missing actually the dev cap mode, but everything else is actually in place. So I'm actually it's a good day.
Cool. So there are a few things that have been happening lately. Um, I want to talk about something called the GitHub Spec Kit. So we're going to talk about that. There are a few papers that have come out saying that 95% of companies that are implementing AI are failing to implement on the AI return of the investment. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. Uh, Effects of the AI on the job market. And there was the Apple event 2 days ago. So today we are recording on the 11th of September. Probably not going to go live today, but yeah, 2 days ago there was the Apple event, and we can talk a little bit about that and touch in some highlights and sort of the how can I say, the expectations, or I don't think they were up to stack to where I was expecting. So we can talk a little bit about that. But I'll just start in the spec kit. So we have been talking about using AI for development. We had a few episodes that we talked about different tools like Claude Code, and we spoke about GitHub Copilot, and um, what else do we have? Claude Code, GitHub Copilot. There's a bunch of tools. I'm just Kiro.
No, no, no.
I'm just looking on my
Yeah,
laptop. Cursor
the
AI.
correct
Uh,
the Google agentic framework for development. We
yeah.
have
So
we have
there's
we
lots
have
of
talked about
things.
a lot of stuff.
Lots
Yeah.
of things. Yeah. And one of the things that people have been complaining about for a while is that if you are generating sort of small pieces of code or bug fixes, AI is usually okay. If you're generating sort of like a proof of concept, so you want to show someone like, oh, let me develop a chess game in half an hour, and you just use the one of those tools and generate something, is usually okay. There is a thing or a theme that has been going on in the market of the AI generation tools are not that great. They don't understand the whole context of the code. If you're trying to do something more complex, usually doesn't work. A lot of the developers are saying that they're starting to become AI code fixers or cleaners. They have to go back and clean up the code and understand what AI has done. I think the experience, even though AI has added a lot in the development space, it hasn't been as great as a lot of people would have expected. You know, those ideas that we had on the beginning of like GitHub Copilot straight out of your GitHub, and you just like sending the request through and doing the pulling the code, making the changes, and then pushing it back, and with the request to be merged, and even other code tools like the OpenAI Codex. So there was a lot of hype around that. I think a lot of people are using AI for coding. I see this is growing more and more exponentially, but there's always this limitation on the quality of the coding. Do you feel the same, Will?
Yeah, I think so. I think one of the things that and I can actually speak as well for some of my I'm guilty as charged, as they say. I do use AI for development activity, as I suppose nowadays the vast majority of developers do it because there's a lot of boilerplates and things like this that actually you can use AI quite well for it. But again, as guilty as charged, it's not a panacea in the sense that you go and straight away you provide the AI with whatever your requirements are, and it's going to be kind of like building completely flawless code. Most of the time, the code is actually going to be good enough that it actually passes some of the early bug tests. But if you don't take into account, I guess, the context of, product development life cycle, or actually a good user experience and etc., then of course there will be lots of features that will be missing. That code is not going to be perfect because actually it doesn't, I mean, even traditionally humans are not necessarily perfect at doing that kind of stuff, right? Like there's always that meme of the business analyst talking to the developer, talking to the QA guy, talking to the DevOps, and at every single time, even between humans, we have lots of flaws and we are always kind of fixing, debugging code. How can you imagine that an AI with relatively little contextual information could be much better than the combination of all those humans actually already doing that kind of stuff in business, right? So it's kind of like an impossible. I don't want to say it's impossible, but it's a lot of expectation to build on the AI that they're gonna be much better when humans are full of flaws in those
Hmm.
in any product development kind of like life cycle, right? So the
Yeah.
AI is gonna be as flawed as the combination of those humans as well. So it's not gonna be perfect. But it will help. I think, and you made a point that I think it's perfect. It's like if you think an AI is like as a way of running, for example, like a hackathon, a rapid prototyping session, that's perfect. That's
Hmm.
what it's supposed to be, right? Kind of because then you get to a good enough state from which you can build out some sort of like MVP, and you can build out something a little bit more fleshed out. But you're gonna have to have the humans in the loop that understand more and more of the context of what is it that you want to achieve. But the rapid prototyping can be much faster, right? So if you're running, say, a hackathon and all that you want is a little kind of like, you know, good enough type of like application, then yeah, the AI is going to be doing a very good job at that. But it's not going to be, 100% flawless production ready in 5 minutes. Not at this stage in the game, because humans don't do that well
Yeah.
themselves. So why do you expect that the AI that is being trained on human interactions will be better than the humans, right? So it's like, it's the pre-trained stuff of the AI at the end of the day.
I think there are a few things there to unpack, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's the expectation that AI can't or shouldn't ever commit any mistakes, which is a very misconception. Like, AI, as you said, is trained on human data and human behavior, so it will have flaws, and we do need to learn how to work with them as same as humans. Um, and for one of the other conversations that we're gonna have later on, like, people expect the AI just replaces humans, and I think there's a bit of a misconception. There's truth and false statements on that we can talk about. And the thing on AI coding, so I have been testing a bunch of tools, a bunch of models, doing different things, and I had, like, for example, experiences or labs that I've done when I just let like a model roguely doing development, and it would do like really crazy stuff, like, like it's not being able to access like an important key and just puts the key in the middle of the code, or it can't access the database and just creates another database out of thin air, like the stuff like that. Like, I've seen code being deleted and it can't recover the code. There's a lot of crazy shit that it does. But the thing is, what people have been claiming for a while, and I spoke about this in a few episodes ago, that I built a framework that we were using at work on how to develop with AI. So it was sort of like a agentic framework. The different agents would do different parts of the jobs, so you could actually get the development a bit closer to a good development that is being followed by some sort of methodology. But now recently, GitHub has released a framework which is just same as I'm saying, but created by GitHub and Microsoft. It's open source. It's called Spec Kit. What it does is, when you are asking AI to do a task for you that is development, instead of going straight into the development, the framework will prepare what needs to be developed. So the first step that it goes through is creating the specs or the specifications. So, like it will ask you questions, it will have a bit more interaction, it will make you give it more information than you would just go to a prompt and say, build a chess game. Like you don't
Yeah,
give
exactly.
enough context for the AI to just read your brain and build
Yeah,
whatever you want,
exactly.
right? So the
So the
spec,
spec kit does a little bit like what the job of traditionally in traditional software development lifecycle would be the job of a business analyst, effectively, right?
yeah. So the steps that it goes through is it creates the specifications, and then it creates a technical implementation plan, and that will talk about how it's going to be implemented, what are the things that needs to work, and etc. And you can add information and have interaction with it. And then it will break down the implementation before it actually starts the development. And the cool thing is that it follows something that they call the core philosophy. And the core philosophy breaks into phases. So the 0 to 1 is what they call the greenfield phase, which is like focusing on generating from scratch. So, like the high level requirements, specifications, implementation plan, and then build the production ready application. There's the creative exploration that happens more for like the focus is for parallel implementations. So we'll like explore diverse solutions. It will support multiple technology stacks and architecture. We'll experiment different UX UIs because maybe when you're building something, you need to do some exploration before you come into your actual, production ready application of what you want to build. And there's another one that is called the brownfield phase, which is like the interactive enhancement, which is where you're going to be adding features into the solution interactively. So you build your MVP, you've done your creation exploration to get to something a bit closer than how you want it to look like. And now you do the interactive enhancements to build on top of what you've already created. And then you do the features, you modernize the legacy. You can use like for modernizing legacy systems or things like that, and you keep
Yep.
adapting the process. So it's quite cool that they are sort of seeing what everyone has started doing to fix some of those issues and created a open source model for people to now take and using to some of those tools. And I know like if you think about GitHub Copilot, a lot of people have been frustrated in using other tools. Like I think Claude Code and Kira are probably the top ones being used right now. But then if you add something like this, even using GPT-5 in your GitHub Copilot, it will tailor more how it's going to be interacting and building the solutions. I haven't used this model in specific because I've got one that I've created, but this model looks like quite neat, and I think it would be really nice for people to work with. And it says that you can use for Claude Code, GitHub Copilot, or Gemini CLI. So they sort of tailored for these three AI coding agents, which is good because it's quite specific. Like Claude Code will work with the Claude MD files and things like that. So it will tailor a little bit for the different solutions that you're using. I think that's quite cool.
Yeah, it's actually sounds amazing to me because I think that that will create that experience that will make humans kind of like, in a way, kind of like still use their brains, right? Like you can't outsource your brain to everything, right? Just like at the end of the day, I think this is even poor for mental health, to be honest, for most humans. So it's bringing that aspect of traditional software development, which is about like, let's create a specification of what is it that you want to do, what are the goals of the solution, what is the, I guess, what is the underlying kind of like, I guess, business goals that you want to achieve by building this solution, and let's properly kind of like specify it before we go and we just like recklessly go and tell the AI, build something here and read the universe of all the crap that is out there, both the good, the bad, and the ugly, and use whatever you want out of all of those code bases as the way to build a solution. This is much more like in line with I guess, building something that actually humans want rather than something that the AI roguely just goes and makes its own decisions and hallucinations as you're talking about in terms of, controls a little bit more like that process,
Yeah,
which I think in the long run, from my point of view, reduces the time to building things to market because you're failing less, not because you're failing before so much, but it's because you're
planning.
reducing a little bit like the assumption, yeah, the assumption process, which is kind of like assumption. Read millions and millions of code code bases and then output something, and good luck with the guesswork type of thing, right? In this case here, it's more like, hey, you human, what is it that you want? Like, what is it that
Mhm,
you want? Who are your customers? What is it actually that is their workflow? How do they actually use the solution? What is it that you want to achieve? And how do the features that I'm building here fit into that? I think we'll engage more humans into that building process because whatever the business analyst, the product manager, whatever is actually kind of guiding some of the process is going to actually be forced to interact with those humans back again, which is something that I think as a society, we're almost starting to forget how to talk to each other. And we will actually kind of say, hey, actually, as a product, I actually kind of don't know what is it that you marketing are saying that what is it that the users actually that they are asking for? Because I have some contacts, but I don't have all of it. So what is it that actually? Because I actually want to build these features here, and the AI will help me build that faster.
mhm.
But please help me understand this a little bit better instead of like just you know. And I don't want to see this with in a pejorative way, but kind of autistic developer goes on and in his head thinks that the world works in a certain way, but doesn't understand at all about
Yeah,
how those users are using that stuff, right? They actually, this forces that kind of interaction to build a solution that actually, to be honest, will have maybe a lower failure rate than what we're seeing in the market now in terms of like AI implementations. And maybe we can touch on that as a, I
yeah.
guess, a segue to that
I
conversation.
think just to close this up, I think there's a misconception that you will write 2 lines and the AI will understand everything that you need. Like it's even not good prompt engineering that you assuming that you will give a prompt that is very high level and the AI will understand, break that prompt down for the code to be generated. Like you need to give enough context. And this is the thing that is closing the gap, I guess, because there's a
Yeah.
big expectation that, like someone that is not even technical will just go and say, "Oh yeah, I wanna build a Netflix platform." But if you think about it, it's just like imagine you come to visit me in Auckland and you say, "Hey, can you take me to PwC?" Okay, there's different ways we can do that. We can cycle
Yeah.
there, we can take the bus, we can take the ferry, we can drive. You didn't specify, so I'm just gonna assume whatever I want based on what I know from you, which might be not
Yeah.
what you want because the LLM doesn't even know who you are. So it's
Exactly.
it's tricky. So I think frameworks and ways of interacting better to give a better context that will be used by the AI to take the steps using its own knowledge, it will be a game changer because the humans are not closing that gap naturally.
Exactly. And maybe forces a little bit like that back to interactions, which I think there's a wider a societal aspect to which like people are looking at the AI and said, oh, cool, actually. So I don't need other humans. I can do everything myself. No, actually you do. We're not at that
And
stage yet.
then
Right.
and
So it's
then,
like,
Will, that takes to the conversation of in the last few months, we have seen a lot of big companies firing a lot of people, and it's usually, or not mainly, but usually in the development space to cover that to be covered by AI. So, like just lately, between August and September, I'm just looking at the news here. Oracle laid off more than 3,000 employees between US, India, Philippines, Canada, and Europe, primarily impacting the cloud infrastructure division and development. So I I keep thinking about, like, have they learned how to use AI development in such a good way that they confident enough that they don't need developers? Or are they gonna do as a lot of companies have done before, even like Duolingo and other companies, where they're going to fire a bunch of developers and see that there's a big gap between development and AI and have to rehire people, which take me to the question that we saw the paper from MIT saying that 95% of the companies are failing on AI return of investment. Is that all
Yeah.
related, or am I lumping too many things in the same thing, Will?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how much we can, I guess, correlate directly the two conversations, to be honest. I think there is some of it. I think there is a natural churn as well in the market in terms of firing and hiring kind of like activity, and sometimes kind of like some of these big numbers of firing kind of they attract a lot of headlines, and people straight away kind of go and correlate that because they hear kind of like different kind of like disparate kind of like headlines of firing a whole bunch of people, AI, 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 firing a bunch of people, AI, AI, AI. Our brains, I think almost like psychologically kind of say, cool, there's a direct correlation between the two things. And
But
so like, AI, AI,
there's a marketing figure there as well, because the companies that started with this were like Google, Amazon, Microsoft, which have very much interest on companies acquiring AI products. And if we look at Oracle, for example, Oracle has a lot of AI in Oracle products, but they also selling data center usage for AI companies. So, I think there's also like a marketing narrative of saying, hey, look, we're doing with AI. Everyone should be using AI, because if they do, those companies will make more money, right? So I think
po-
there's a little bit
uh,
of a story there as well.
possibly there's a bottom line. I think there's a few things here. So and I guess trying to roll back to some of like the I guess more like almost like rigorous kind of like research that is happening in terms of like if we roll down back to the facts. So the MIT study that you were saying, which is like more is called the Gen AI Divide, the State of AI in Business 2025, right? And the reports in this report, so they looked at it 300 public deployments of AI and interviewed 150 executives, right? And surveyed about 350 employees. So statistically, the universe of that, which then grabs a lot of like headlines relative to the universe of businesses building on AI, is actually pretty tiny. So there's one thing in I guess the statistician in me looks at that kind of, okay, need to take that kind of stuff with a grain of salt. And what they're saying is because they grab a lot of headlines, is the big companies, right? And they have put 30 to $40 billion in enterprise Gen AI developments. And they have so far in terms of conclusion saying like there's very little to no return into all of that AI spend that has been going down there. And then there's only about 5% of those pilots that actually have succeeded in terms of enterprise AI actual developments. So putting the hat of the CFO on that, if I'm spending that much and my bottom line is not increasing, and I have to please to my shareholders, what is the biggest cost of any knowledge business? Is people. So actually, there might be a correlation, but not exactly the one that we're talking about, that people naturally think, which is like AI, firing. It's more like projects are failing, and I've spent a lot of money. I've got actually to make my shareholders whole, so I fire people. which is more
Mhm.
close to a normal business cycle rather than actually AI actually really doing its thing, right?
Yeah,
So
and I know you're gonna cover another paper, but I was just gonna say, if 5% of the companies are succeeding, shouldn't we be looking into those 5% of the companies and understand what they're doing? Because it's just like,
yeah,
as you're saying, as a project, it's just like, in the beginning, a lot of companies would try to implement ERPs. Implementation was always like a nightmare. It would take 5 to 10 years for people to get used to the new ERPs. AI is the same thing. Like, I do see a lot of clients, and the things that I see is people are not taking an approach of thinking how to think AI, how to use AI, how to take AI through a journey. Like, in my mind, is very clear, like enable people with AI, people driving AI driving AI. So it's sort of like a cycle that you go through for transformation, right? A lot of companies I see, they just pour a lot of money, like, we're gonna give everyone co-pilots. And it's like they just expect that from tomorrow the business is AI and everything is AI and we're saving money. Like, you can't give like a bunch of bikes for people that have no idea how to ride bikes and expect that they're gonna be faster, right?
exactly, absolutely,
And I think that's
absolutely.
what's happening. Everyone just thinks that AI is gonna solve all the problems of everyone. Like, I'll give you ChatGPT, and tomorrow I want you to be doing your
That's
job
it.
in half of your time. Like,
Exactly. That's right. And then you're gonna either create more output or you're gonna free yourself of like some of the outputs that you're doing that maybe you didn't like so much, whatever it is. People have, you see that kind of stuff in all sorts of things. There will be people that will be super hyped up, kind of like super into it, will be wanting to do the maximum amount of it. And there will be a whole population that's like, hey, I don't have training. I'm comfortable and I
I
actually
don't
sit
have
my
time.
butt and
I'm
then
busy. I'm
I don't have
busy.
time. I don't exactly whatever. Right. So, and you have that spectrum of different, I guess, individuals across organizations. There will be the one that's like, yeah, I'm an early adopter on anything. Like, yeah, it's new. I'm adopting. It's new. I'm adopting. And then there will be the specters like, I don't have time for this, and I'll just keep doing my thing, and we'll see how it goes. And if there's kind of like people not really driving some of that kind of stuff to cater for all of the spectrum of individuals, I can see how this
Yeah.
will actually
Companies
really
need
have
to
like a
have a
real uplift.
strategy,
Yeah.
short, medium, long term, and drive on that strategy. And it's not just going on the hype of AI from tomorrow. I can fire half of my business. Like, that's not how it works.
No, it's not. I would like to jump a little bit, like in aspect of like in terms of the some of the research that there's a pretty solid research that has been done by Harvard recently in terms of the in terms of like the actual core effects of AI that can already be looked at in the market. The research was done by a few people within the Harvard Kennedy School, David Deming, Lauren Summers, and Christopher Wong, and what they have seen is some of the actual actual empirical observations of AI in the careers, right? And they looked at not only kind of like all of these big public companies that attract all of that, the headlights, but more like the mid-tier, the mid-sized companies, which essentially in the US, again would like to highlight that this is kind of like a US type of story, and that doesn't necessarily can be extrapolated across different jurisdictions because different jurisdictions are following different speeds of adoption, right? The
Yeah.
same way that,
Culture,
technology follows different.
regulations, etc., etc., etc.
Exactly,
Yeah.
culture regulation, etc. So in the US, and they looked at actually all of these mid-tiers, kind of like smaller and mid-sized business, how they actually kind of like adopting AI and what sort of effects are actually happening on which industries or job occupations and between the different generations. It's very interesting kind of research, or happy for us to actually include that research in the in the show notes. What is clear here, there's been happening are two big factors. So so first of all, as well, the researchers were quite rigorous in the sense that they tried to eliminate some of the big outliers that have happened over the last 5 years. The biggest outlier was, of course, COVID-19, right? So they tried to remove some of those outliers because they disperse the data a little bit too much, and they are not kind of, so it was actually mostly post the kind of like the whole kind of recovery from COVID, and since then. So mostly from 2023 onwards to look at actually the data. Two key things. So the biggest occupations that have been actually impacted so far clearly and showing the data by AI is software engineering. It's clear, right? So software engineering, where actually kind of like software engineers actually impacted, and people actually are directly involved into development of software. That is an occupation that has been impacted. The second occupation, it was actually some impact to a smaller extent on retail and kind of like customer client kind of like interactions, like
call centers, contact
call centers and the like. So these are the two really occupations. They're very, very little data so far in that research that suggests that any other types of occupation have been directly impacted by AI. So that's actually an important point, because a lot of people actually work in all of those industries, and they hear the same headlines as everybody else. But things, again, the correlation, AI job is not a direct relation across all of industries equally. So these are the two things.
It's going to take our jobs.
Exactly.
Maybe it will, but it hasn't yet.
It hasn't yet, right? So those two kind of occupations have been impacted. The way that it's impacted, is what people are realizing now. The impact is not the same across generation, and I explain myself. But the biggest impact of AI across those, small and mid-sized kind of like tier companies is on seniority of people. What is happening across that? Because these companies actually have to be more efficient. They are not firing people, because the process of firing is a costly process for companies. So that's why kind of like that headline that we were mentioning earlier doesn't necessarily translate into the reality of what is happening in the ground. So they are not necessarily hiring people. So for example, like all of the graduate students, all that kind of stuff, they're not firing people, or they're not firing senior people. They are actually just not replacing existing job. And there's a big difference, right? Because a firing process, you have severance packages and all that kind of stuff that actually needs to be taken into account. Not replacing, it's a completely different thing. It's a company that is deciding not to hire people for a particular role.
Yeah, or growing the company without adding more people, right?
Exactly. It's still being able to generate the same output for the shareholders of the company without necessarily having to add additional headcount.
Which is efficiency growth. Which is
it's efficiency growing.
Which is what I think AI is here for right now, is efficiency.
Exactly. It's creating all of this problem that you're seeing across all of these different jurisdictions we've been all complaining about. Is like, for us to keep increasing essentially economic output, so like unit of input for unit of output, which actually generates higher GDP, higher standards of living, all that kind of stuff, we have to become more efficient. Like it has always been the case for the last 150 years since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. It's always been the case. And many countries around the world have been having actually problems with productivity increase, while they keep, governments and all that kind of stuff keep spending. But if there's no increase of productivity and actually increase of living standards, we cannot be paying people more just out of for the sake of it, right? So increasing of output is necessary for us to keep actually increasing standard of living. So that kind of stuff is starting to happen, but it's actually, there is an inverse correlation here. So the impact of not hiring is being compensated by a higher level of hiring for senior roles. So companies are deciding not to hire junior graduate software engineers coming out of like a computer science degree, for example,
Like
and
entrance jobs.
entry level one. So the highest impact here is happening in the cohort of 18 to 24, 25-year-olds. This is the cohort that once they start, they have done whether like some internships or apprenticeships or anything like that, they are not and they finish that, the companies are not putting more apprentices and more graduates in the headcount. That's what's happening. So that curve is quite clear, because the apprenticeships especially for computer science kind of like degrees and software engineers, the curve is very clear. It's doing this. On the opposite side, more senior engineers, actually, the job market is actually picking up. There
Yeah,
is
because
more
they
hiring.
can drive the AIs. The AIs are the interest developers right now.
Exactly. So they can drive the AIs. They can know. So all of the work that anyone that has worked in a software engineering company will know, which is there's a lot of that work where features are given to a junior. The junior goes codifies it, the kind of thing, and then actually the next thing there's a QA process by a senior software engineer that goes on, cleans up the code, creates better partners, makes a cleaner code base that is also consistent with all of the understanding of the rest of the code base that actually that senior developer does. Right now, that first step in the process is done by the AI, and therefore actually the senior developer is doing. So there actually is more hiring actually happening for senior developers, less hiring happening for junior developers. So that's one of the clearest pictures that is happening now in that mere tier companies, right? So again, it's the disparity here is generational. So everybody that kind of like that is maybe senior developers hearing the same kind of like news, they say like, oh no, but actually, software, but no. If you're a graduate, yeah, you can be concerned about that. Maybe find some other field to complement your skills. But if you're senior, actually, for now at least, and possibly for the next 5-10 years, you're pretty good, because you're only going to get more senior because time is only going to pass. And so long as you have the skills to keep up with that AI development, you're going to become like a unicorn for some of these companies, because you're
Which
going to
is
actually
strange.
create
Which is
output.
strange because a few years ago would be the completely opposite, right? Like if you're old,
Exactly.
people would rather prefer getting younger people and upskill them and keep them for longer and pay lower wages and have a bunch of younger people. And now is sort of changing the dial to, all right, we actually want the older people with more experience. And that creates, like you say, as a disparity. Like I was watching a video this morning, one like really big US investor, he was saying like, if I had to say to someone that is in university today, like learn AI, get really good at AI, because a lot of companies have zero to none AI budget, zero to none AI teams, no knowledge of what AI is, and the younger people can go into those companies and really help them to understand and use AI. So AI change management is sort of like the new role that is coming up for the future now.
Yeah, but maybe for some of those, I don't want to call kids pejoratively, but like for some of those kids that are actually coming out of grad, maybe the way to approach that will be a little bit different. Whereas actually previously they say like, oh, I just know very well the syntaxes and how to write code based on all of these trials that they have done in
Yeah.
university. They are kind of like,
Learn to be
they're
a
not really real.
specialist on AI development tool, right?
Yeah. And now they could be more like, oh, actually, I will learn a little bit better about, product development or getting cross-functional skills around maybe marketing or something like that, that allow
But
them to get into the AI
but
train.
also they could be specialists on AI tools. Like imagine if someone say, hey, look, I'm a Claude Code developer specialist. Like I know how to get the best out of Claude Code with level of accuracy of 90% or whatever. Those people
Yeah.
will be valuable, right?
They will be valuable for, I guess, for a period of
For a
time.
while. Yeah.
Again, for a while, up until the point that some of that skill eventually gets commoditized. The same way that now, it has evolved a lot. Like just in the last couple of years, prompt engineering just a couple of years ago used to be like the thing. Now it has become, everybody that uses
Just the
AI on a
thing.
daily
Just
basis. It's the same thing as like, can you Google, right? Can you can
yeah.
can you Google? It's like
Yeah.
now right now it's like, can you write prompts? Yeah, everybody is learning. I mean, of course, people that have been trying for longer have better prompts that they write. People that have been trying for less long, they write
But
less
then
good
if
prompts. But
AIs are getting so good that prompt engineer is not even a thing, like if you can just
yeah,
talk well, it's fine. Like before in the older models, you would have to do like a very specific prompt to have this, have that. Like the AIs are closing that gap by themselves. But yeah, I know what you mean.
yeah. So I think that's kind of like the thing. So anyways, I guess as I think one of the purposes of actually our podcast and our conversations as well is sometimes take the headlines and break down the bullshit out of it, right? And I think some of we try as much as possible. Some of these researches and things that we bring as well into the conversation allows us to be a little bit more, I guess, more factual and less just reactive to what's happening, because allow us to see what is reality, or like I guess a search for some sort of like truth versus bullshit, which is kind of like headlines and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And some of these researchers actually is I guess shows that like impacts of AI and enterprise Gen AI, but also impacts into job markets and societal kind of like changes that are done by actual researchers that have some level of rigor into what is it that they are looking at. Because otherwise we're just like, all of us, and include myself, we're just fucking monkeys kind of like looking at headlines and thinking that that's it, it's the doomsday, it's the end of the world. Whereas, to be honest, the journalists that actually are writing all of that stuff, they are just as fucking biased as we are,
Yeah. And
right?
it hasn't been replaced by AI yet. It's probably using
Exactly right.
AI to write the news. Yeah.
Exactly. And if the AI is just reading all of the things that the other journalists
But
are
we
doing
it's
about
just
doomsday
like
tomorrow,
computers, right?
it's
Like in the past, you would have those people with like you would come and say, "Hey, look, there's a computer now with Windows 3.11 that you can do Excel spreadsheets or Lotos 1, 2, 3 or whatever they used at that time." And they were probably like, "Oh, I don't need a computer. I've got this lady here that does this. I've got this guy that does something else. I've got this person. Why do I need a computer?" Like
yeah,
it is a change, and it has happened before, and we will adapt and we will evolve as a species. But I keep thinking, like in my mind, all these transformations, like the first industrial transformation or computers, internet, anything, when they happen, it was hard for people at the time. Some people really leverage, and like we had the boom of the internet and things like that. But if they haven't happened, we wouldn't be where we are today. So it's very selfish for us to say we can't go through this
absolutely.
revolution, because if we don't, our kids in the future are not going to have something that they could be having because of us. And it's just natural. Like we will find ways of fighting disease and living longer and saving the earth, and like all these important problems will be like the leverage to help happen, to help solving those problems is technologies. AI is how we evolving as humans. So it's important that we're going through this. It's understandable that nobody understands the impact of the thing because it's quite new. A lot of people are anxious about, lots of people will be impacted, but the world will
There's
transform once.
displacement. Yeah,
Yeah.
there will be displacements. Like there hasn't been a single technological revolution from all the way from the first industrial revolution up until today that hasn't um, had some level of displacement and some level of adaptation, sometimes impacting more a cohort of individuals than actually another one, right? As we can see for some of this stuff right now, actually the cohort of individuals that are the most impacted seems to be the ones that actually are working in the software engineering field rather than actually than other cohorts, right? So there will be definitely some aspects
And
of it,
just
but
adding on what you're saying, revolutions, if we haven't gone through, and I know some people might be thinking like, oh, I'm more likely to be displaced or whatever. You're not thinking about the people that are gonna, you know, lose money, not have food to eat or whatever, not have money to pay their bills. Of course, I'm concerned about those people, and I hope like the government and companies and whatever can help somehow. I don't have the solution for that. But just looking in the past, if we haven't gone through the first revolution, we wouldn't have cars, we wouldn't have planes, we wouldn't have buses, we wouldn't be able to travel. If we wouldn't have had the computers, we wouldn't have Netflix, we wouldn't have the internet, we wouldn't have smartphones. Like, like where we are today is because some of those things happened in the past, and where our kids are going to be in the future is because of what we're going through at the moment.
100%. And I think also like even if I think in terms of transforming from the technology field to the biological aspect, right? So I've heard something extremely interesting recently by a professor um I think of physics within one of the biggest actually American universities, and he said humanity, like what we call like civilization, has passed from like pretty much like from the Greek and Roman ages all the way to 1840, where the uh, life expectancy was 30 years. And during almost 2,000 years of history, only had an increasing life of expectancy of 5 years, from 30 to 35 years. Then the Industrial Revolution and all the things actually happened out, like as I guess the spillovers of the Industrial Revolution happened with the evolution of medicine and all that kind of stuff. And in just 150 years, we've passed from life expectancy of 35 years to now, depending on the country, around 80 to 85 years. It's a huge evolution in terms of living standard from 2,000 years of thing to a compressed evolution of only 150. And now we are potentially in one of those other moments with all the development of technology that where we can create economic output that increases, that then allows us to invest back as potentially a spillover of this into our own development of like of health and bioengineering that allows us to potentially extend not only the lifespans, but the quality of the lifespans, right?
Yeah.
As we are
Yeah.
having less kids and all that kind of stuff, right? And who knows when we look into humanity, like in 20, 30 years time, or even more, whether we would have potentially managed to crack the code, the biological code that allow us actually to extend our lifespans with quality, potentially by another 20 or 30 years, or potentially even more. We don't know,
Yeah.
right? We are at the point now where those two things actually are quite interrelated, where our productivity in most countries have kind of stagnated, and so has our life expectancy. Right now, our life expectancy is pretty much stagnated around most countries around 75 to 80 years, like in developed nations. And our productivity is also stagnant. So
Mm,
if we maybe create some of the economic outputs that allow us to also dedicate some of the spillovers of all of this creation into better health and not only longevity, but longevity with quality, means our brains don't deteriorate, even though actually our bodies actually live longer, then potentially there's actually a lot of future good things. But we have to go through the hard moments that we are going right now with all of this displacement,
yeah.
potentially to create those future life standards. Anyways, wanted to kind of like
I
to
know
finish
we
on
need
a good note.
I know we need to wrap up, but I just wanted to really, really quickly just do a debrief on the Apple event, just because we said that we would. So I'll do that really quickly, and then you can add some comments at the end. So the whole focus of Apple is reinventing the user interface, and they coming up with something that they call the liquid glass. And the liquid glass will be the new way of interacting with Apple devices, most of the devices that has like a user interface. The other things that came out is Apple doesn't seem to be focusing a lot in AI as calling AI for the users as Google is with a lot of the Android and the Google Pixels and etc. But they're doing some things that are a little bit more innovative. So, for example, if you've got one of those, how do we call it? The iPods or what is it called? Um, the earphones. How do we call them?
The AirPods.
AirPods. So AirPods now you can so I think on the 15th, so in 4 days, so you're gonna be able to use your AirPods and have live sort of translation or dub translation from conversations that you're having. So let's say you're speaking to me in one language, I'm listening on my AirPods in another language. And then if I speak back to you and you don't understand me, I can hold my phone close to you and you will read subtitles in your own language of what I'm speaking. So this is quite cool. Of course, it's using AI,
It's
but
pretty cool.
they're not calling AI on the smart wearables. So like the Apple Watch, they're going to focus a lot more on sort of health. So they've been talking about having something that is like how can I say, like a work buddy, like a AI. They're not calling AI, but of course it's AI, like a work buddy that looks at your heart rates and your calorie burn and the oxygen in your blood, and then it will give you prompts like to motivate you to do exercise, to keep exercising on things that you're doing that works and things that don't work. So it will be a bit more personalized. The Apple phones are gonna get a bit thinner, so I think they're gonna call AirPhone Air or something like that. So they're gonna be a little bit thinner. And the last thing I think to call out is the Apple phones prices are gonna increase by $100, but the lowest capacity will go from 128 to 256. So you will have more storage, but it's going to be $100 more expensive. And I think that's probably to do with some of the tariffs and not being able like to utilize all the commercials that they had with China and etc. So that's starting to splash on the consumers. But I think those are probably like the main things. They didn't talk much about the the Apple Intelligence, so it wasn't the focus for them. I think the focus is like we need to give the products that people want, which it's a bit of a downer to me. Like I keep looking at Google Pixel and the amazing stuff that they're doing and starting to create a little bit of a FOMO on me that I've been using my iPhone for such a long time. Keep thinking if I should try it out, Google Pixel for a while. But yeah, so that's in a nutshell, those are the main things that were covered in the event. Any comments, final
Yes.
comments before we wrap it up?
No, I really enjoy the fact that in the future we're going to be able actually to be, I guess, talk to people in different languages,
Imagine that,
and
like going to China and
hopefully,
understanding what people are saying.
hopefully people are going to be able to, to talk at, I guess hopefully the experience, once you test that out, the experience of it will be good enough that there won't be so much of a lag in terms of when someone is speaking and the other, and the AI kind of like translation is actually kind of close enough to atomicity. But if that happens, then I think that would be a pretty cool thing. To be honest, looking forward to testing some of that out.
Yeah, a lot of translators will be losing their jobs.
Yeah. Well,
Not,
I was
I'm,
actually I
I'm not
tested I
laughing here because it's funny. I'm just laughing because we just talked about like people losing their jobs and how
displacements
it's impacting the
displacements.
market and displacements. I hope that doesn't happen, but I think the technology is pretty cool. But it sounds like another disruption for some of the markets. Like translation of documents and papers is something that have been highly impacted. I've got people that work on those sort of areas, and now it's sort of the voice speaking translation, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I've tested some tools around that, like the voice speaking translation, and so far, like they haven't been, I guess,
Great.
the level of atomicity is not great. It doesn't allow you for having the kind of conversation that we are having right here, because it's more like those memes around, Zoom and I guess Skype meetings where someone is saying, "Hey, how are you?" And then it takes like a few seconds. "Oh, I'm good." And then takes another few seconds. So it's like it doesn't allow for the level of normal interactions that actually
Like I
people have.
tell a joke, I laugh about it, and 10 minutes after you're like, I got it.
Exactly, yeah, which is very, very weird, right? So,
Yeah.
and I've tested some of those tools that exist already in the market, so they are already at that stage, even though they allow for the translation. So hopefully, because Apple tends to be quite focused on good products and being kind of like quite perfectionist around that. Hopefully they solve some of it, because otherwise it would be pretty shit.
Yeah. All right.
But
So
let's
it's
see.
with
Let's see. Cannot say anything before actually testing it out.
yeah. So with that, we'll close up the podcast for today. It was quite a long episode, so thanks everyone to listening all the way to the end. And Will, if they have listened to the whole podcast, what should they write in the comments
Um,
to make sure that
uh,
they pay the pick something
yeah,
that we
maybe.
spoke about?
Yeah, maybe some comment around who's been the most impacted so far by AI displacements. Is there an equal development across the spectrum, across industries, and across ages, or is it not? And what do you think? And not allowed actually to go and actually use GPT or other tools actually to find that out. They actually have to
Yeah, on the
to
transcription of
to
this
actually.
episode.
Exactly. It needs to
Yeah.
be on the transcription of the episode.
Cool. Thanks very much, everyone. Thanks, Will, and I'll see you next time.
Awesome. Thank
Cheers.
you.
Bye.